My name is Chris Rylander, author of Legend of Greg, and you're watching Author's Voice.
Welcome to Author's Voice, connecting authors to the world. This is LadyBird and Friends, and I am your host, Betsy Bird. Woohoo! Today, we have a very special day. We are talking about The Legend of Greg, which is coming out with J.P. Putnam Sons Books for young readers. It is in hardcover for $16.99, and thanks to them, we are having its very own author, Chris Rylander, over here, joining us today. Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. I'm doing very well.
Great.
If you guys are watching this on Facebook or live on our website, please use the comments to submit a question to Mr. Rylander. You can include your name and where you're from, and most importantly, you can order a signed book for yourself or for somebody else. Right now, all you got to do is you go to authorsvoice.net and you can get your copy sent to you. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. But today, let us talk about said book. Why would you want book? You shall find out why you would want book. Tell us about book. What book about?
So, The Legend of Greg. It's my first foray into fantasy, which is really different and exciting and fun. And it is about a middle schooler named Greg Belmont, who he has one friend in the whole world. He goes to a rich private school where he doesn't really feel like he fits in. He doesn't have a lot of friends, but he's okay with that. His whole life he's kind of put up with what his dad calls the family curse, which basically means the whole family is just doomed to terrible luck. And so it's put him in this position where he's just really good at dealing with bad things happening to him. He's so used to it that he's able to just go, okay, well, maybe tomorrow will be better. And so he has his only friend in the whole world is the most popular, richest kid at the school. And without giving away too many spoilers, there comes a time in the book where Greg finds out that his identity and his family and his life are not what he thought. And it does involve his friend. And the setup of the story is essentially, what if these two best friends found out they were destined to be mortal enemies forever?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Where did the idea for the book come from?
So the idea did generally grow from that concept of, two friends. Like what would make two friends who are the best of friends like suddenly find out like, oh, we have to be enemies? Like what conditions would cause that? That was part of it. The other part of it was just the desire to want to try to do a modern fantasy book. All my other books have been set in the real world, and of course fantastical things happen. In the Forrestal series, it's Godfather middle school. Not totally realistic, but of course it's in the real world.
It fits so well.
Yeah, right. And fantasy and science fiction, although my favorite genres to read, I've always been very afraid to try to write them because the idea of like this world where literally anything I want to have happen can happen, I always thought that was like too big. It was too grand. I thought like, there's no way I can wrap my head around that. I can't write a book like that. Like I would just
choices.
Yeah, exactly. But once I started doing it, I realized how much more fun it made it. That like it, especially with my style of humor, it worked even better. That I could stretch the jokes beyond the realm of reality. So
right.
And
really
to
fun. A certain extent, is it playing off of tropes that kids are already familiar with?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because with the Godfather books with the Forrestal, you might have some kids who know the Godfather. You might have a couple, but with this, I feel like it's something kids might be more familiar with.
Yes. That was another thing that inspired the book, is I've always kind of wanted to do like almost a spoof, but like like a loving spoof of the modern fantasy book, just because there's been so many huge fantasy series. I wanted to have fun with it, and so one of the things I did with Greg was I made him he hates fantasy stuff. So when he finds out that he is actually a fantastical dwarf, from a long line of dwarves. He's like, oh man, like Lord of the Rings, this stuff is so lame. One of his constant jokes is like, I bet there's like some magical weapon that has a name and it's got some lame name, like the Sword of Narlac.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course he finds out that that is true. So he kind of spends a lot of the book, a lot of eye rolling and groaning. But he does grow to love his new community, which I think it's a loving poking fun at fantasy.
So would you recommend this book to just fantasy fans, or would you also recommend it to kids who are like Greg, who disparage the fantasy genre?
I think it could definitely appeal to both. Of course, an author's going to say it appeals to everybody.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's only for fantasy kids. Yeah, I know. I'm
it
kind
is,
of like handing you that one. Yeah,
it is definitely a fantasy book, but it's pretty fantasy light in a lot of ways. Like the world building, I tried my best not to get too descriptive, not to spend like 7 pages describing like a throne room. Yeah, right. Yeah, because that's one of the reasons I don't read a lot of fantasy. I really love like fantasy movies, but it's just the descriptions. Like I didn't want to make it Game of Thrones, where we have a 600-page children's book describing everything. So I think it does appeal to a lot of people in that way, and the part of it that takes place in the modern worlds has a lot of humor and has a lot of fun with fantasy tropes, which I think would appeal to non-fantasy readers.
Now, how'd you come to the name Greg?
I wish there was a really cool, long, fun story behind this, but it's honestly was just I wanted once we were doing the title, The Legend of, I just wanted the most like boring, ordinary name. And no offense to any Gregs out there.
No.
I just wanted a really ordinary sounding name. I thought it would make it more.
Well,
funny.
I do feel like Greg is inherently more funny, even than Bob, and Bob's way up there.
Yeah.
But I feel like Greg goes over, and Greg has an extra added advantage. Of course, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Greg Heffley is the main character. So I think you are actually even going to lure in the Greg Heffley fans to a certain extent, where they're like, Greg is funny. Grab Greg. That makes sense. And it has an epic series of failures in its subtitles. So that's a very Wimpy Kid thing. I think you're definitely gonna get in on that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to hit you with my hardest hitting question.
Okay.
All right, this is very, very important. Okay.
All right.
So first and foremost, we both live in the Chicago area.
Yes.
All right. Not many children's books are set in the Chicago area.
Correct.
Now this book is set in the Chicago area. So two-parter question. One, why do you think people don't set books here? And two, why did you choose to do so?
Good. This is a very good question. Very hard hitting.
Yes, I know.
The first part, it would be hard for me to even venture a guess as to why not a lot of kids' books are set in Chicago.
Yeah. It seems a perfect place to.
Yeah, it really does.
People.
And a lot of well, it's because it's such a great city.
I know.
It has like everything.
It
has
seriously has everything.
Parts that feel rural-ish, like not that far outside the city, and then the downtown.
Large bodies of water where
yeah.
nothing can kill you.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe that's not good for books, but still.
We should probably just spend the next 20 minutes just talking about Chicago. And how
I
great
think
it
that's
is.
the best way we can do it. Yeah.
So I couldn't even gather a guess as to why no one sets books here. But I think a lot of it is New York. If you're going to go with a major city, New York just feels like such a natural city
Well, a lot
to
of people
go with.
know New York.
Yeah,
It's very iconic.
a lot of writers live in New York.
Yes.
So the funny story to answer part two is that this was originally set in New York City.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is not. I wasn't entirely comfortable with it, and I'm not. I think I went in that direction because the book sets up this world where dwarves and elves still exist, and the elves are in this position where they are. They tend to be the rich people, like the secret elves that you don't know are elves are actually, the guys working on Wall Street and the, hedge fund managers and all the people making all the money. And so New York just obviously seemed like a natural place to set it. But then, the more I was talking with my editors, they were like, let's mix it up. Like, let's do something that not a lot of books are set in. Like, let's go to Chicago. And I'm like, that's great. That sounds awesome. I want to do this. I love Chicago. I want to set a book in Chicago so badly. And then once I really started writing, my version of what modern dwarves are, fantastical dwarves, it really fit with things that people view as Chicagoan. For instance, they really are huge meat eaters. They love to eat meat.
Oh.
So like a great lunch to them would be like a huge plate of like sausages and sauerkraut.
hot dogs.
Yeah.
Is there a moment in your book where someone attempts to put ketchup on a hot dog?
No.
Okay, foof. Okay.
I
'Cause we know that would not go well.
it
So,
wouldn't,
yeah.
and I'm unfortunately I do love ketchup on my hot dogs.
I do too.
I also
but I'm not from these here parts.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I'm not original either. And I'm also a Cubs fan, and I still like the White Sox too. That's another thing that I.
Oh, that's another thing. Yeah, you can be killed for that. Yeah.
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 But yeah, so it's a lot of Chicago things just seem to fit. The dwarves they fancy themselves, they're hard workers. They don't care about material things. They're very blue collary, and Chicago, in a lot of ways, I think still has an identity as like a blue collary type city. Guys with beards and flannel shirts walking around.
Exactly.
That sort of image. Even I know
They're
it's
probably
not
all into hockey.
Yeah, I know that's not totally what it is, but it just fit. It really seemed to work. It felt right once I started doing it.
Very nice. Very good. Oh, we have a question.
Oh, excellent.
A question from the ether. All right. So this is coming from Alex in, let's say Poway, California. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry, Alex. I am ignorant in such things. So Alex, he asks, how far do you think you can push a fantasy storyline in a single book when you are writing a multi-volume series?
Oh man,
That is a good question.
that's a very good question.
Yeah.
It's a tough challenge. So one of the things that I did differently for this book than any other book I've done was I wrote an outline for the entire series before writing this book, which is The Forestall was 3 parts. My other series, Code and Conspiracy, was 3 parts. But for those, I wrote the first book and really had no plan of where I was going with it, like the larger story. But with fantasy, because you have to build a world, I think it's important, number one, to like get some sort of groundwork, like where am I going with all of this? And that really helps. I think that helps develop a plan of like how far you can push it in the first book. And so for us, one of the larger elements of The Legend of Greg is that the world's changing and magic's coming back and is going to change the world as we know it. Like the internet there will be no internet, there will be no modern technology. And so we knew right away that I couldn't push that too far in book 1 because then the last 2 books would just be like post-apocalyptic chaos.
Yeah, no.
And I have to avoid large body counts, middle grade books. So we knew we couldn't push it too far, but I wanted to get us to the edge of that danger. So it happened naturally because of the plan and just knowing we were doing 3 books. Became easy to kind of like.
To what extent do you follow your own outlines? Like, do you do an outline and then you start to follow it and then you just sort of zero out and then you're like, outline, go back to it. Like,
it varies from book to book. I try to follow it as best I can because it's easier and it's a thought out plan that the editor's on board with and everyone loves. And but it does happen occasionally where I come up with this idea. In fact, in this book, along the way I had this thought of I wanted a scene where the kids are walking, they rescue a polar bear from the zoo, and they're walking down Lakeshore with this polar bear to go meet some illicit contact on the dock who's gonna like ship the polar bear off somewhere. Anyway, and it took up like 20, 30 pages. It was this huge side story that I just loved. I just really wanted this scene, so I put it in there. And of course, through 3 revisions, they eventually were like, this is just gotta go.
polar bear comes right out.
Yeah. So I will diverge a lot if something strikes my fancy and I'm like, this looks fun, I want to do this. But for the most part, I try to follow the outline.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. Were you a D&D / Middle Earth fan when you were a kid?
I was not.
Okay.
I really liked fantasy stuff, but I was kind of in this way. I call this book Fantasy Light. It was kind of my interest in fantasy. There was an old board game I used to play with my dad and brother called Hero Quest. That was like D&D. It was like half
But
D&D.
you had a board.
Yeah, it was a board with figures and set rules, and you couldn't just like make up whatever you wanted to happen.
Yeah.
And
You couldn't just like die from an
yeah,
avalanche.
it was kind of like
Yeah.
exactly. It was kind of like playing out a choose your own adventure book in a board game. And so I really loved that. I liked some fantasy, but the D&D thing seemed too immersive to me in some ways.
Okay, so you're coming at this more from Greg's point of view then.
Kinda,
You're
yeah.
sort of seeing it
Yeah.
from Greg's view. That's fine. Okay, so in this book, I know this much. A murderous bro troll kidnaps Greg's dad. Please explain, A, what is a bro troll? B, where did this idea come from?
Okay, yes. So
Because I like the term bro troll.
yeah, bro troll.
How can you not?
So I made the fantastical dwarves in this book as a race. They're very, for whatever reason, they like acronyms, they like nicknames. And so Greg is constantly going through the book, like giving things nicknames. So people he comes across, monsters he comes across, he's giving them like nickname, little mental names in his head, in his own head. And so there's a scene in the book where a troll just destroys their health goods store, which is a small little like shop in Lincoln Park. And because magic's not back in the world yet, I needed this troll to not be magical. And so one way to do that is I wanted to make him appear to just be a very large human being at first. So he comes into the store under the guise of being this like huge weightlifter, this bodybuilder, a gym rat essentially. And so he's wants workout supplements, and he keeps calling Greg bro, and he's just kind of a very stereotypical like gym rat sort of guy. And so of course when he turns into this like bloodthirsty monstrous troll, Greg immediately in his mind just starts calling him bro troll, because that's just what he does.
I like that very much.
And that continues into the second book as well. For instance, the opening scene of the second book is a little teaser. Is he is being attacked by a monster that he nicknames Mullet.
Nice.
Eventually, in a year, you'll be able to read and find out why that is.
Okay. I have an idea.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I am under the impression that when an author creates a book, they must sacrifice small creatures to the great cover jacket gods, because you never know what kind of jacket your publisher is going to give you. Yeah. You seem to have sacrificed many animals to the jacket cover gods, because you get consistently good covers. And I think this is a good example of that. This cover is fantastic.
Yeah.
You must have, you can't have that much input on it except if like something is like horrendously wrong. Yeah. But did you see this in the process as they make it? Do you know if there were other iterations? They don't even tell you usually. But,
no, yeah. As far as I know, there weren't any other iterations. They hired a really amazing artist to do this. His name is eluding me at the moment. Yes.
Why that would be Brian Edward Miller.
Okay, I wanted to call him Brian.
Shout
David
out to you, Brian Edward Miller.
Brian Edward Miller, yeah, he did an amazing job. And so the moment I saw it, I was like, that is awesome. I love it. I didn't even have, the only feedback I think I had originally was like, make the axe bigger and like more fantasy looking.
But it even shows Chicago. It even has like a little like skyline of Chicago on it.
Yeah, he does. If you look at his other art too, he just always does he has these very expansive art pieces that show these huge complicated scenes, but yet are simple enough where they don't look messy.
Yep.
And it's impressive. I don't know how he does it,
but
it's
very
great.
Impressive.
Yeah, I've been very lucky with book covers. And I just the other day saw this cover sketch for book 2, and it's equally expansive and cool and impressive with a good focal point. So yeah, I'm really excited for that, for people to see that too.
All right. So I do have to ask what you have against Thursdays. The very first thing you read when you open this book up, and this is even before you get to chapter 1, and the very first thing it says, before you start reading this book, what day is it? If it's a Thursday, close this book immediately and start tomorrow instead. Only bad things can happen reading this on a Thursday. Trust me. What you got against Thursdays? The fact, do you not like Thor?
I personally have nothing against Thursdays. But the Belmont family and the fantastical dwarves in this book, in large part, they think that their curse extends to Thursdays most specifically. So Greg grew up being told that Thursdays are the worst day of the week. Whatever you do on a Thursday, you're going to fail. The worst things are going to happen to you. Like, just have to deal with it. But the good news they're always told is like, tomorrow's Friday, which is the furthest a day away from Thursday. And so, like, this, the way he always looks at the bright side. So I have nothing personally. I think it came from the opening line. The very first thing I ever wrote for this book was the opening line, and it remained unchanged, which I don't have it memorized, which is, it should come as no surprise, the day I almost got my face clawed off by a vicious monster was a Thursday. And where that came from in the opening line, I can't say. It's just what I wrote down, and so hence Thursday became the cursed day for them.
And that's a very good opening line. I like a good opening line.
Yeah.
I like it when you can try to guess what the book is from it too. So that would be a good one to try to figure out. So on top of all of that, and I hate to keep harping on the Chicago, but you do actually have a fair amount of Chicago landmarks. I know that the Lincoln Park Zoo makes an appearance in here. There's a nice mention of Lakeshore Drive and of the lake itself. Does the Bean Our big shiny bean, does it appear in the book or not?
No.
No, there's no bean. Okay.
No, there's no bean. There wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason to what I included or didn't include. A lot of it was just like whatever fit the story best. Like,
well, that's good writing. That's
yeah,
not
like
I must work in the bean.
Yeah, it was more of course, because I live in Logan Square, I danced around it a little. I didn't want to hit that too hard, but I danced around it, and I really like Humboldt Park, and so Humboldt Park has a big role in the book. The only thing about doing the real landmarks that kind of backfired a little bit was one of the big climactic scenes takes place in former Hancock Tower. And when we wrote it, of course, it was still the Hancock Building.
Oh, yeah.
And then they changed it, but they changed the name that lost its name or whatever, like one day before we could make no more changes. And so I like hastily emailed the editor, like, can we change all the mentions of it to like the characters just acknowledge that it's not called that
Otherwise, it
anymore.
becomes a historical piece.
Right, yeah. So we did it. We got it in there, which is great. But that is one dangerous thing about, using real landmarks in your book. Just like how the Forestall, the main plot of that was the Cubs are never going to win a World Series. And the main characters know that. And then so once that happened, thankfully the book had been out a long time, but once that happened, now the book is worthless. No one ever needs to read it again.
Exactly. And yet we all watch Back to the Future Part 2, which mentions it. So I don't know what that says about it. So you mentioned that the polar bear gets taken out, and then was there anything else you lost in the course of writing this that you felt like really, what was left on the cutting room floor?
Most everything that I really wanted to get in there, I was able to keep in there, which is great. The only thing is that one scene of a bunch of kids with weapons and a huge polar bear walking down Lakeshore, cars swerving all over, like as they pass this site. I lost that moment, but that was it. That was the only thing I can recall.
Okay. It's a little His Dark Materials anyway.
I'm usually really good about, if I have to cut a large scene, just taking my favorite parts and just getting it in somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm usually pretty good about that.
So when you present to large groups of children, you have written, correct me if I'm wrong, you've mostly done novels, right, for kids?
Yeah, yep.
You haven't done any like picture books or anything like that?
No. I've done 2 adult novels that were ghostwritten. Otherwise, it's all been middle grade.
Right, so you're probably not reading those to the kids.
No.
Here's a book, my name's not even on, kids. No. All right, here we go. But picture books are very easy to do in front of children. They have a set time limit. You know when they start, you know when they end, you're good to go. I would assume novels are difficult. When you do a presentation, let's say you're doing a presentation of Legend of Greg to a large group of small children, do you do a PowerPoint? Do you read an entire chapter? Do you have audience participation? Like, how do you sell a book like this to a large crew?
Well, So when I do presentations, and I'm sure the publisher wouldn't like to hear this, I don't try to sell the book necessarily. I don't read from it. I don't even actually talk that much about my books because I don't want to bore them. And it's not that I think the books are exciting, but I think reading the books is really fun. Listening to me talk about the book and not give away spoilers doesn't sound fun to me. So I just try to sell myself and get them excited about like what might be in my books. And so that involves a PowerPoint with lots of pictures, pictures of me as a kid. Because my mom, who's a teacher, gave me the best tip when I got started. She said, just lots of pictures of you as a kid. Kids love to see that. And she was right. That was a good tip. Another thing is I tell a lot of crazy, zany stories of things that happened to me in my life. Things that had never occurred to me just how kind of uniquely insane they were until I told one of the stories by accident during a school visit and the kids went nuts. And I was like, wow, I should be doing this at all the school visits all the time.
Yeah.
And so now my presentations are essentially me just like telling stories from my life and how they fit into eventual parts of my books. And it just, I kind of pander. I just try to entertain them and make sure the kids have a good time for an hour and had fun their hour out of class. And then if they want to buy books, great. If not, whatever. At least they had fun.
Yeah, I mean, like a kid's not going to be polite if they're bored by a book. Yeah. I mean, the kids have no manners. They're not like, well, we should pay attention because this guy obviously traveled a really long way to be here. So we're gonna settle this one down. They don't think that way. Like if you lose the room, you've lost the room.
That's true.
Yeah, so it makes sense. And Jack Gantos does it, so it's got to be okay. So yeah. Do you have like some sort of like moral, like you can write, kids, or stay in school, or
I used
don't do drugs?
I used to do that anyone could be a writer, moral, which I still believe, and I still put that in there a little bit. But as I realized that maybe only like 10% of the kids want to be writers at all, or even have, I've softened that a bit, but I still do keep it in there because I want kids to know, even if I am only speaking to 10 kids in a group of 200, I want those 10 kids to know that, or even 10 kids who don't know they want to be writers because they don't think it's possible, that it is really possible and that anybody can do it. Because I didn't start writing until I was 23, 24. And the main reason was because I thought it was impossible to be published. And I thought that like kids can't be writers, and you had to, be a professorial type person at 40, smart and inquisitive and write books. Like I just didn't understand that you can just mess around and have fun on a page for a few months, and like someone might actually like reading it.
Why did you start writing for kids?
That's a very long story, which we probably don't have time for. But the very short version is my first book I was trying to get published was a historical book about the history of divorce in the United States, about how in the 1890s North Dakota was the only place you could get divorces. Anyway, it was going to be this historical book, and I was getting a lot of interest from agents. Finally, one agent said, but no one actually wanted to represent it. One agent was like, your writing is super boring. This is a good concept, but your writing is boring. And so I was like, boring? Like, I'm not boring. I'll show you boring. And so I wrote this wacky novel for adults about these characters. One of the guys has a talking mustache, and like Elvis is in the book, and he gets kidnapped by postal workers. And one of the characters is a three-legged wolf who collects things. It was just this insane book. And I just started sending it to agents. And one agent was like, I don't represent adult books, so I don't know why you sent this to me. But I think you'd be really awesome at writing kids' books. Your sense of humor seems fitting. Does that sound appealing to you? And I thought, yes, that sounds awesome. Like, I love kids' books. I worked at a Barnes & Noble for a long time. I would page through them, and I loved them always, as a kid, as an adult. And so, yeah, I read some kids' books, realized he was right, and that's what got me started on that path.
Okay, but I'm now a little upset that you have not written about a talking mustache at this point. I think we need a talking mustache book at some point.
If I ever revive that book, it will have to be under a different name because it is extremely filthy. So.
That's all right. I recommend the picture book format. I think that would be a perfect fit. Okay. Just the talking mustache. And now I can imagine why it would be dirty. Okay. So I know you're working on the sequels for this. Are you working on anything else as well that you can talk about, or not?
Probably not that I can talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But hopefully I'll have another book out soon, around the same time as the sequel. But yeah, I'm very, very excited for this series, and I'm having more fun working on the sequel than the first one, and I'm really, really, really excited for the third book, where we're gonna go all out fantasy for the third book. So I'm really excited for that.
Oh, and I would like to say, recently an announcement was made that you sold the film rights to it.
Yeah, the film rights were optioned by Temple Hill production company, which did Love, Simon, that new movie, and the Maze Runner series. And I'm not going to say more in case I'm wrong about the other ones.
No,
but,
I think you're right.
Yeah, so they're hopefully they can find a studio and get it made. That would be really exciting.
That would be awesome.
Really fun. Yeah.
Fingers are firmly crossed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Me too.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, just to remind you, one more time, people. We have been talking about, in case you have forgotten, The Legend of Greg. It's coming out with J.P. Putnam Son's book for young readers. It's in hardcover for $16.99. I'd like to thank the good people at Putnam for allowing us to talk to Chris today. And then coming up soon on Author's Voice, see other page. Whoop! Oh, other page. Thank you. We've got some upcoming shows y'all should know about. So, first up, Solved. Author Victoria Thompson will join host Libby Hellman to discuss her new thriller, Murder on Union Square. That's on Thursday, June 14th at noon. On Lit with Love, we've got author Sarah McLean, who is going to join Sonali in a live question and answer session on our Facebook page with a pre-recorded interview next Thursday at 2 p.m. You can check our website for details. If you have a question or you wish to order a signed copy, you can do so at authorsvoice.net. And if you are watching this on YouTube after the broadcast, you can actually still order a signed book, it wasn't a one-time thing. You can still do it. We got plenty of other things. Look behind me. So the link is under the title. Follow the link, order title, easy peasy. All right. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks all of you at home. Good night.